find out.
Okay. Well, just to start, I believe both your parents played music. Do you think you would have been drawn to music anyway, if not for that influence?
Possibly. It's hard to say, but I mean, they played music, but the one that was most outgoing with it was my mother. She liked joining choirs, and eventually my brother and I were rounded up to be in the local church choir. So that's how I got my first lessons in, harmony and what have you. And I found it wasn't that hard. So I think I had the ability from the beginning. I was always liked music, and I loved when rock and roll came along. I loved rock and roll straight away. It was exciting. So, but I guess those things, hearing different stuff around the house, and my dad was a jazz fan, so I heard a lot of jazz, and that whole thing about improvising music came reasonably easy to me. I was able to, and that comes in handy when you're writing songs because you've got to make stuff up. I think maybe I would have been, still going down that track if it hadn't been for my folks. But, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
They definitely influenced me, yeah.
Tell us about the formation of the Pink Finks. Were you a pretty ambitious young lad in those days?
No, I wasn't ambitious at all. I just liked music, and this is all part of the Ross Wilson folklore. Is that I got hit by a car, and I spent summer holidays of 63, 64 in Prince Henry's Hospital, which is no longer there, but on St Kilda Road. And at the time, the Beatles were all over the radio, and there was a few other groups coming up, and they had one of the sounds that was coming into pop was harmonica. It was like the Beatles, that, and they had harmonica on quite a few Beatles songs. And then the Stones came along just a little bit after that. By the time I got out of hospital, there was even more harmonica coming in, sort of R&B revival. And so while I was hanging around at home waiting to get better enough to stagger back to school, I asked my dad to buy me a harmonica. So he went up and he got me a Hohner harmonica from a music shop in town because he worked in the city. And I started copying things on the records, that I heard. And I had one thing about it is I got a very good ear, so I can hear something and then I can work out how to play it, So by the time I got back to school, I was actually quite adept for the small amount of time I've been playing the harmonica. And a friend of mine, Keith Glass, who later became ran important record shops and managed the birthday party, did all kinds of stuff. He had a little band playing Rolling Stone songs and whatever was going on. So, and I sat in with them at a church dance, playing harmonica, going, man, I'm a king bee. But I wasn't actually singing. I was just playing the harmonica. He was singing. And these other guys that had been on the bill, younger than me, they came up afterwards. They'd be an instrumental band, playing like, you got to put your mind back to the days of the early 60s. There was a lot of instrumental music, like the Shadows in particular, things like that, the Ventures. So they were playing all that kind of stuff. And they said, we want to play that kind of music, the Stones and all this new R&B junk. And we, you play good harmonica, can you sing? And I went, yeah, I can sing. And so I went along to Ross Hannaford's parents' garage, and suddenly I was singing in a band, and rapidly took it over. Like, how about we do this, and how about we do that, and here's this old blues song, why don't we, Stones are getting old blues songs and changing them around, why don't we do that? So we were getting our own old blues songs that I like, Sleepy John Estes and Howlin' Wolf and people like that, and messing around with them, John Lee Hooker, big fan of his at the time. And so that's how the Pink Finks came about. And that was like all during 1964. So by the end of 1964, we got a gig down at Rosebud down by the sea and played a teen dance there for a couple of weeks and had a few adventures, and then came out and decided we want to make a record. So we made a record, Louie Louie, and on our own label, and it got on the charts in Melbourne. So that's how I started.
Yeah. Were Ross Hannaford's extraordinary guitar talents obvious to you even way back then in those very early days?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, he was like a bit of a child prodigy. He'd been playing in this little... You've got to remember, just before the Beatles, or sort of around the same time when they broke through, there was a big trad jazz and folk music revival. And one of the reasons was that was because rock and roll had gone all soft until the Beatles made it interesting again, you know. So there was just all this kind of roots music around, and he had been playing banjo in a little kind of pre-teen band, and they'd been on TV a couple of times. So we were all just completely naive and didn't have much skill at all, but we were trying, you know. And he had bought a guitar, and it was just a crappy old acoustic guitar with a pickup on it. So you hear him playing on those early records, and it's sort of like, you know, there's not a lot going on there, but there's a lot of enthusiasm. But so what happened was he and I kind of grew up musically together and influenced each other. And we were all listening to John Lee Hooker and all this wild stuff, you know, and trying to figure out how to play like that, which is almost impossible because there's only one John Lee Hooker. And we started to develop. And because you're playing teen dances and, you know, at the weekends, and you develop, and you're young, you're like a sponge, and you start to absorb all this stuff. So he had innate talent, and I had innate talent, you know, and we were very, very lucky to find each other because we were kind of groove-wise in the same place. And I tell you what, there was, living around Hampton and Moorabbin, we were probably the only two guys that in the whole of Victoria that were like that, you know. So it was fate. It was a very, very nice piece of fate that put us together. And then over the next couple of years, as I left school and then he went on to art school and whatever, we were like still playing in bands, and I started writing songs, and then the Party Machine happened. But we stuck together, you know, up to when Daddy Cool ended. So that was our education, and he influenced me and I influenced him, you know. So, and it was great that we had this. Once I started playing big guitar, we had this kind of telepathy. We were kind of, without being told, we would just find parts that fitted together, you know.
Yeah.
And he was always like that. I had that ability too. So that's why there's that kind of spooky dual guitar stuff on Daddy Cool, you know, that makes us distinctive. No one else sounds like that.
Now, there isn't much recorded evidence of the Party Machine, but you certainly gathered attention through other means, from the Vice Squad, no less, for the contents of that book of song lyrics. Were you a bit taken aback by all that controversy at the time?
Not really. I was pushing the limits a bit, you know. We were just write songs about whatever you wanted to write about, you know. And some of the songs were good and some weren't, and some had good lyrics, some didn't. You know, we put out a songbook because people didn't know our songs. We say, here, have a look at this while you're listening to us play, you know. And then it got Go-Set that printed it for us, and there were a few copies lying around the office, and they decided to put them in with prizes to kids. And some mother took offence. Yeah. And so I didn't actually get any trouble. Go-Set got into trouble for publishing it and distributing it. Nothing happened to me at all, except I got a whole lot of publicity, and that was one of the things I helped teach me about. Like, don't worry about getting banned and all that, because it's when it comes to rock and roll, that can be a good thing.
Yeah.
Daddy Cool got banned, Skyhooks got banned. Who cares as long as the singles get on the radio? You know.
That's right. Talk about your brief period in England with Procession. How do you look back on that time now?
Well, that was kind of cool because Party Machine I'd gone professional and we had enough work, and then we went and did some interstate gigs and got ripped off like you wouldn't believe, to the extent where even all our gear got stolen. So we came back to town with our tails between our legs, and around that time I received a call from Brian Peacock, bass player in Procession, who been aware of what we were doing before they went over to England, and they were shaking up the lineup a bit and thought they needed it. It might be a good idea to have like a standalone frontman, and gave me this call, and I went, yeah, I got nothing going on here. It was ripping us off. It was kind of depressing. And so from that car accident that it happened that got me into showbiz, I just turned 21 and there was a bit of insurance money, you know. So I spent that on a ticket and went over to England and hung out with Procession, and we started doing songs together and, you know, swapping ideas, and we played at the Marquee Club, had a residency there, and a few other places, the Revolution Club. We lived out in Surrey, outside London, in a big old house. It was really cheap but massive, and, you know, beautiful countryside. So it was a great experience for me. It was like leaving grey old Melbourne. I always thought Melbourne was a pretty grey old town in those days. It's not so bad now. And repressive, you know, the Vice Squad. Arthur Rylar seized my songbook. You know, people were ripping us off, and there wasn't any money in that. And Party Machine had put out one single and nothing had happened, you know. So I went over there and nothing really kind of transpired. We did a little bit of recording that never came out, and then the band was kind of falling apart. But all the experiences I had there were really good. So by the time it came, the band disbanded, and it was time to come back to Australia. So I didn't have any money, but I was fairly self-sufficient, you know, being an ex-Boy Scout.
Yeah.
Knew how to rough it, and hitchhiked with my new bride back to Australia, through Europe, the Middle East, all these places that had the shit bombed out of them since, Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, Iran, Pakistan, India, and then finally made it back to Australia and landed in Darwin. But what it did was I had this better perspective on where Australia sat in the world. It wasn't like this big thing and there was nothing else. You know, that's what it feels like when you're young and you're stuck in a boring place, or a repressive place as it was at the time. And when I came back, I was losing that repression. You know, there was a whole kind of underground scene which I tapped into, that turned into the TF Much Ballrooms, which is what spawned Daddy Cool. So there you go.
And you formed the Sons of Vegetable Mother when you came back. Did you have high hopes for that band?
Not really. I just wanted to make some interesting music, you know. I got a part-time job, and I got a job at this book warehouse, and Gary Young happened to be working there too, because it was at the time, which wasn't affecting me at the time, but there was this record ban, you know, on the radio where the ARIA companies were trying to make the radio stations pay to play their records, and they said, no, if you don't want, we're not going to play your records now, we'll play these independent records. And so Ron Shooter got his foot in the door doing covers of, you know, overseas hits and on the Fable label, and also anyway, what happened was that put a lot of bands out of work, and that's why for the first time in years Gary Young was working at a book warehouse, you know. But that's where I found him, and I knew Hannah and he knew Wayne, so that's how it came together. And Mike Rudd, who had played bass in the Party Machine, he had formed Spectrum, and I was going around seeing all my buddies, you know, and seeing what's going on. And he said, oh, yeah, Spectrum, and we're managed by these particular guys, and they're running the TF Much Ballroom. And so we tapped into all that. And so very, very quickly, I sort of got back on my feet, even though it's not a professional. So within the space of a year, I got back in, I think it was January 1970. Daddy Cool played his first gig at the end of October in that same year, you know, so quite a bit transpired, pretty industrious. And then that summertime, 71, we basically took over Melbourne, got signed to Sparmac Records and put out Eagle Rock about a little over a year after I got back from overseas.
It's well documented.
From that time, I was a professional. I've been professionally involved in music ever since.
you're a strong fan of Frank Zappa back in the day, and there's a Zappa album that to this day I still can't listen to Ruben and the Jets album from Frank Zappa without thinking of Daddy Cool. Was that album a huge influence in what you were putting together?
It was an influence, but I wouldn't say I was trying to copy it.
No.
What it was an influence was he was a big fan of doo-wop music, and that steered me into that kind of area, which I was aware of anyway. But there was a whole area of it that I hadn't been aware of, which was pre-1956, because that's when rock and roll exploded in Australia, 56, 57. But before that, there was all this other fantastic R&B, particularly West Coast R&B that I loved. And so I had discovered all that stuff, And so that kind of humour that he had, that was a humorous kind of tribute to the naivety of doo-wop music, and I felt that too. I felt this is really good stuff. And I think on the very first Daddy Cool album, we really captured that kind of innocence and naivety, and that's why that music, you listen to it now, and it's a bit rough around the edges, but it's got this sort of, what would you call it? It's got a kind of integrity, I guess. It does evoke the kind of when I first listened to rock and roll, And so some of those songs that we used to play in Daddy Cool, which are on the live album, for instance, That'll Be the Day, Lollipop, blah, blah, blah. I had all those records in my collection from when I bought them when I was like 10 or 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, it typically happens with emerging musicians. They'll, say like the Hoodoo Gurus or someone will go back and listen to the things, play some of the things that inspired them, And that's the sort of thing that happened with Daddy Cool. So, pretty happy about what we did. But, it only lasted a couple of years because I was kind of looking into that area of music and wrote a few songs that seemed to fit it. And then it was like, well, I kind of feel like, going back and writing more contemporary stuff like I was in Sons and in the Party Machine. And some of the Sons songs surfaced with Daddy Cool. Lovin' an FJ was one of them, We played that with Sons of Virtual Mother. We played Eagle Rock with Sons of Virtual Mother too. So then I wanted to move on. I went, well, I've done that now. I've done rock and roll high school. It's time to do something else.
Yeah. Do you recall the writing process?
But the trouble is, people want you to stay the same. They go, it's like by then you're working for other people, the record companies and that, and they want to have, write another Eagle Rock.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I want to. The closest I came was I wrote Hi Honey Ho. I went, okay, I need to come up with another riff,
Yeah.
I wrote another song in A that's inspired by old blues records,
Do you recall when and where you were when you wrote Eagle Rock, the actual writing process?
Yeah, I started it when I was in England, and we went off to there's a street I can't remember. It's near the Marquee where there was like guitar shops and stuff. And I bought a guitar, and I was trying to play guitar a bit better, And so, because the guitar I had it was amongst the gear that got stolen in Australia, so I didn't have a guitar to take to England. So I bought one over there. It was a Guild, I think, and I was mucking around, and I came up with the riff because I was trying to play finger-picky sort of like pre-war Mississippi blues, and came up with that riff, which is sort of really ragtimey kind of thing.
Yeah.
It does evoke pre-war music, and I actually did a ragtime version of it on an acoustic album I did for Liberation. But it's got a bang bang, get on grank, it's like a piano. It went gang, get glank, and came up with that riff, and I was going, gee, this is pretty good. Sort of, get a bit boring. Let's go down to it. So I just kept playing that over and over till I got good at it, and I saw this photo in the paper, in the blues article, and people dancing around a juke joint and said they were doing the Eagle Rock. So I went, oh, that's kind of that picture and the old dance style and the style of the music that I'm writing. It's sort of like that, you know. So that became the title, like Eagle Rock, you know. And then it wasn't until I got back to Australia, after months of not having guitar and just, you know, having adventures, that I sort of started working on it again. And when I got back to, I did a bit of work on it in Darwin, where I was for 6 weeks, and then we made it back to Melbourne. I remember sitting in my, to answer your question where I wrote it, sitting in my old bedroom at my folks' place with an acoustic guitar thinking, okay, we've got the verses, and now it really needs a chorus. And that's where I came up with it. Hey, Eagle Rock. And how many chords did I know? Not very many, right? So A, and then G, that's the surprise.
Yeah.
And that's typical Ross Wilson, to take it away from just a normal old blues song or something, you know. It had, and then it's got a B minor in it as well. So, like, it's got this colour that made it pop. It's got a pop chorus, you know, stuck on on an 8-bar blues, pre-blues kind of progression. So all of the influences that had been there. And on the flip side, it's got Bomb Bomb. And in a way, they're kind of similar, because I go, now listen, we're stepping out, going to turn you around once to the Eagle Rock. Bomb Bomb goes, baby, don't you know I love you so? Baby, don't you know I love you so? Baby, don't you know I love you so? Where both the songs repeat these things and end up, you know what I'm getting at there?
Yeah.
They kind of repeat a thing and then have a punchline. It's so very similar. But the flip side was the doo-wop. So, like, all the things that have been kind of rolling around in my brain came into coagulated in Eagle Rock in particular, you know. But also the doo-wop side with Bomb Bomb was quite, and of course we were like a bit of humour, so we did like bum 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 bum, you know, chipmunk things where we record it slowed down and then sped it up, you know. So, well, they're having a bit of fun, you know.
Yeah. The band was so different to a lot of the Australian bands at the time. There was a lot of heavy and serious music happening. Do you think Australians were looking for that sort of simplicity?
I don't think they were. But when they heard it, they loved it.
They loved it, yeah.
Because, I mean, we played it, you know, we'd been playing Sons of Vegetal Mother occasionally at the TF Much Ballroom, and like you said, there was all those, you know, Spectrum and Mackenzie Theory and a few jokey bands like Lip and the Double Deck Brothers. They were funny. Captain Matchbox, they were funny, but they were a bit archaic, you know. And then we did Daddy Cool played the thing, and everyone got up off the floor where they'd been sitting and listening to the Ernest stuff and started bouncing off the walls just instantly, bang. So they must have been waiting for it, or I think the bottom line is that Daddy Cool was an incredible band. You know, they really had a rhythm that made people jump around. That still does. You play Eagle Rock, DJs are having a slow note, they put on Eagle Rock, get people on the dance floor.
Any standout memories of the American experience with Daddy Cool, or anything you would have done differently if you're given the chance?
Well, what I would have done differently is not have the guys as managers, which was Robbie Porter, the producer, who was a great producer, I thought. But, you know, him and his mate Steve Binder could be quite irritating, because we were like coming from the hippie kind of, I was a little bit of a hippie, but the thing was we had succeeded in Melbourne through out of the underground scene, and then we were a hit in the colleges and universities. We were really big, and some festivals. And we went to Hollywood, and we did get a record deal, but we should have been doing that same thing, you know. We should have been playing the Fillmore. We should have been playing, we had offers to go with Elton John and stuff, but they stuffed it up because they're squares, you know.
Yeah.
They want to do it like the Hollywood way and overhype everything, you know. These are the new Beatles and stuff. Well, so we're not the fucking new Beatles. You know, so by the third time we were there, they actually realised we were right. and we played this Midwest college tour. It was fantastic, you know. Jumped on a bus and toured all around the place. We're based in Minneapolis, which is a really nice town, college town. Played all these unis and colleges and basketball arenas and stuff, and we went down really great. But by that time, the steam had kind of was running out, and I was looking at America, going, I could bring contemporary, you know, it's just like bringing Colson Newcastle singing old doo-wop songs.
Yeah.
Not that we were doing that all the time, and people loved it. They loved it, but I was trying to put it, you know, things we recorded in America. We recorded Teenage Blues, which is really kind of rockin' song, things like that. But you know, we kind of got annoyed with the way things were going. They were like sort of white-handing our Australian manager, and you know, because there was two of them, there's only one of him, so they were voting with, and they were, you know, oh gee, where's our, you know, we had Eagle Rock was a hit in a few cities over there, and in other places around the world, but we weren't told that at the time. You know, and they were kind of like getting the record advance and doing whatever they want with it. And one time we're in there, Steve Binder's office, and he's a powerful guy. He's even made the Elvis comeback. Yeah, Elvis in Black Leather, the comeback TV special, and the Tammy special, and he still was around. He was still doing, like, you know, Emmys and what have you, directing things up till recently. But we said, so we were spending all our money going over there. Well, where's any royalties come in, you know? Got any statements for us? Oh, there was a fire at the office the other day.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I was so fucking naive, I believed it. Because I'm a trusting sort of a guy. You know, it took a long time for me to figure out that people lie and cheat. You know? I'm going, oh, gee, that's a shame. Fire at the office. You know, and that's the kind of pricks they were. You know?
Yeah. Talk about Mighty Kong and why that was so short-lived. One fantastic album, but nothing to follow.
Well, you know, personally, I don't think it is a fantastic album. You know, I hear the things that went wrong rather than the things that are there that are good. Yeah. Because it was less than I wanted, but there's a good reason for that. I was a bit mad at the time. Mad, insane, right? Because the Daddy Cool thing had fucked with my head. So, on the one hand, I think my vision was right, that I could have a contemporary band and take it to America. And to give him their due, Porter thought that was possibly a good idea too. So they, you know, went ahead and we recorded an album for him. They got this guy, American guy, to come out and produce, but you know, it's not that good a sound, I reckon. And so, and the other thing I learned was that chemistry that you can have with four guys, e.g. Daddy Cool, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it with other guys. So all the guys that were in the band, I really admired the way they played. And, you know, Russell Smith, guitarist, fantastic. And I really loved Company Kane. You know, I thought that was the kind of thing I wanted to do. Well, not exactly the same as them, but, you know, like pushing forward, pushing the boundaries a bit. But I don't think that there's only a couple of standout songs on it as far as I'm concerned. It's a bit confused because I was confused.
Now, you're also involved in the production of Skyhooks during their heyday. Do you recall the first time you saw the band, and how did you approach the job of producing them?
Well, what happened was I decided after that year of, you know, recording and touring with Mighty Kong, with, you know, not great success and wasn't really enjoying it. I thought, well, we've got to pull the plug on this. But we had a few gigs to do. One of them was at the Melbourne Uni in their big cafe upstairs, and you set up on the floor. People play there all the time. And supporting us, this is like almost the last gig that we did, you know. Yeah. Supporting us was these guys, Skyhooks. And they were really, I thought they were really funny. They had everything that I liked about, you know, humour, brashness, and some pretty fucking good songs. And very rough. And I knew a couple of the guys were like Peter Inglis and Bob Starkey's brother, Peter Starkey, who'd been around playing, you know, with early Joe Camilleri. I knew all those guys because they're coming from the same scene I was back in the day, around Pink Fink's time. So, g'day, Peter, how you doing? And then they started playing, and I'm going, and Steve Hill was out front, in a lame cape, and they were just taking the piss out of everything.
Yeah.
And I thought, I said, who wrote these songs? After they come up and come say, that guy over there, Greg. Right? So Greg and Freddie were the rhythm section, and then I sort of stuck up so I said, give me a call. So Greg called me, and I ended up setting up a little publishing company called Doodah Music, and I had him signed and also Wayne Burt, because Wayne had been working with my wife Pat, Rock Granite and the Profiles, right? And we'd given him a few gigs with Daddy Cool and stuff, so I liked his songwriting. So I was mentoring some songwriters, right, and thinking, we've got to get this stuff out there. It was like it was coming from a good place. My motives were pure, I just want to get those songs out so people could hear them. And so I signed Greg and gave him an advance, and I gave him what was then the best deal on percentages, because I didn't like it. Typically, everybody who signed a publishing company with all the big publishing companies, it was always 50-50 and life of copyright. And I said, fuck that. I don't like that being done to me. I'm going to give you more than that. I'll give you 70%. And because you don't know me that well, we'll just go for 3 years, and then you can, whatever songs you write. If you want to move on after that, you can do that. So that's what we did. And then the band rapidly changed. They got Bob Starkey on guitar and Red. I'm going, gee, this is pretty good. So take him into the studio and cut a whole lot of demos with Steve on vocals, started shopping it around. They were getting better and better. And then Steve left because he was a real kind of lefty. He was union man and Bolshevik and socialist. And so when he was taking the piss, he was actually meaning it, He was sending up the whole establishment. And as they became more successful, he went, nah, I don't want to be, I'm not a pop star. I'm too ugly and I can't sing that well. And he was right. And he left. And Greg said, I know this other guy. And they tracked him down. He was working down the coast on a crayfish boat. And it was Shirley. So I go and see him playing with the new guy at the Village Green or somewhere. I go, holy shit. And it just came in. Everything that we had done, all the work we'd done prior to him joining, all was worth it, because he just came in and he was the cherry on top,
Yeah.
And suddenly there was a lot more interest in signing them, and I put up my hand and said, look, I don't want these guys to... I know these songs intimately. I can hear things that we could do in the studio. I haven't got a track record as a producer, but if you let me have a go, we'll see what we can get. And we went in, and it only took a couple of weeks. We came out with Living in the 70s album, and, that was saved Mushroom Records.
Yeah, that's right. And the rest is history.
And it took me a while to figure this out, but it was, a few years down the track, after that Mushroom had become really successful and had the sports and the models and the blah, 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 I thought to myself, hey, they couldn't have done that if they hadn't made all that money from
Skyhooks.
Skyhooks, So it really was an important moment, not just for like Skyhooks and the fact that, what they injected into Australian music was incredible, like singing about Aussie stuff in a rock setting, and social comment, and their brashness and the way they were able to handle the media as a team. I mean, it was sort of very much like the Beatles. They could all speak and they could all take the piss and not get sucked in by the media. So, and then all that money went back into the Australian industry, and more albums got recorded and all the rest of it. So, me and Skyhooks, I think, did the world a favour.
Absolutely, no. Can't deny that. Hey, I was looking through Mondo Rock's entry on Wikipedia the other day, and it has something like 34 members of the band listed through the years.
Yeah.
And about half of them were like in those very early years in the late 70s. Were there any specific factors that made it difficult to get that settled lineup in the beginning?
No, it was mainly because I didn't see it as a permanent thing at first. After Skyhooks, or Skyhooks was still going, I think. I got into bed with, business-wise, with Glenn Wheatley, and we started Oz Records. And so and then I started to get itchy feet. I'm going, I want to perform. I don't like just sitting around the office doing all this crap, And so I formed Mondo Rock. It was just called Ross Wilson's Mondo Rock. But we only played for we'd play about 3 weeks or something. So I just get whoever was around, One of the great bass players at the time was Mike Clark, and sadly not with us anymore, but he was doing a lot of sessions and stuff, so I got him on board, and a few other people that I found, and we had the first Mondo Rock, and then we took a break, and then I thought, what do we do now, I was writing songs. It stimulated me to write songs. So the first song I wrote was A Touch of Paradise. I went round to Gulliver Smith's place and said, got any lyrics? I've got to write some songs. And he said, look through here. And I had a big pile of poems and lyrics and stuff, and I found A Touch of Paradise, started strumming the guitar, and that was that. So that was a good start. We played that at our first gig. And so it was a sporadic thing for about 2-3 years. And then it became more solid, and we cut a couple of singles when the lineup settled down with Laffy and Bullpen and Slavich on keyboards and Ian McLennan on drums. So that it settled down after a while. So all that floating lineup was mainly in the first couple of years.
Now, the introduction of Eric Mccusker into the band brought another major songwriting element. How much do you think that contributed to the eventual longevity of the band, being able to spread the songwriting load, so to speak?
Oh, absolutely. And, that was a definite decision of mine. If I was the CEO of Mondo Rock, I've got to get a pat on the back, because after we did the first sessions for the Primal Park album, I realised that my guys were getting into the dope a bit too much. So I finished the album by recording a night at Bombay Rock, which was quite successful. And we put out the Primal Park album, and I said, well, guys, I can't have this kind of behaviour. So I'm going to disband the band. I got out of the contract because I was disentangling myself with Glenn Wheatley too, because Little River Band had taken off. He didn't really have time to devote to the things I thought were important back here. So that was all quite genial. We unravelled our connections and got out of EM. So there I was. I didn't have a record contract. I didn't have a band. I started looking around, and found a few people. A few people contacted me. But we still didn't have a guitarist. And I was thinking of the guy, Andrew Bell, who'd been playing with Pat in a band, but he was just sort of into feminism and all that kind of stuff. He was in Stiletto at one stage. So there were certain songs he wouldn't, I can't play that. Feminist. Okay, just because the song's got sexy sort of stuff doesn't mean you can't play it. Oh, yeah, no, I can't play that. So I went, I've got to get someone else. So we were auditioning people. I already had, the PC on bass and James Black, and of course I was friendly with Wilbur Wilde, and also the previous the bass player from Mondo Rock, the Primal Park lineup, Simon Gillies, was living with Wilbur Wilde and Eric Mccusker, and we were still on good terms. And they sort of started lobbying me. So I had listened to this cassette. This guy that staying in our house, he's from guitars from Sydney. And I listened. I went, wow, there's some interesting songs there. And I was looking for someone else to help take the load. For me, it's a bit hard to write a whole album of really good songs, you know, all by myself. So, and he was very prolific. He was on a roll. So I heard these demos and we got him along to audition, and I wasn't convinced as a guitar player that he was the right guy. He'd been playing with Captain Matchbox Whoopee Band. The main thing I didn't like was I didn't like his amp. It was too scratchy and didn't sound good, you know. So we got him to play through a Marshall and sort of amp it up a bit. And he, to give him his credit, he was like really eager to fit in. So he did all that. And so a couple of more auditions, they kept coming back to it and going, "This guy's got talent. What are we going to do?" You know, I was going to step up to the plate. And he did. And we went, "Okay, let's go." And he had a shitload of songs, and he kept churning them out. And I had some good ones. And so between us, we started to develop a sound, you know, and it was a quite distinctive sound. A lot of those songs were pretty out there, and the more out there they were, the less chance there was they were going to get on an album. But some of them did, you know, like The Popular View and Mondo Sexo, and a couple of others that were on the first album. So, like, it was a great relief to me to have somebody else who could, you know, a bit of rivalry kind of did come to the surface. You know, I've got an ego, so he came up with the first hit that we had, which was State of the Heart, but I spotted it because he'd done it as a demo. I said, "Listen, give me a listen to those demos you did for your publishing company." And on it was State of the Heart. And I said, "How come you didn't give that to us?" And he goes, "Oh, because we're doing all rock and roll stuff and that's a ballad." And I went, No, we got to do that. And that was our first big hit, you know, the gold single. And then spurred on by that, I thought, shit, I got to write something too. So I came up with Cool World. That's our second single. So
you're good for each other in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, he's a very clever guy. And my job was to, as leader of the band and as lead singer, is to somehow interpret, you know, that music that was part of the band but I hadn't written. It's still a very big job to, like, come up with. His songs are not easy to sing, a lot of them. Some of them are, but not. They come from a melodic sense that I wouldn't apply those rules myself, because I come from a different place. So they'd be kind of swinging back and forth, and I'd be kind of trying to interpret it, and he'd go, "No, here's the melody here," you know. So we worked together on that. And then I think the best example of me interpreting his song and of us working together as a band to extract the most from an Eric Mccusker song was our biggest hit, which was Come Says the Boy. Because you're going to put out a record, you've got to make sure, and it's a song people haven't heard before, you've got to make sure it's the definitive version. You know, you've got to sing it in a way that no one's heard it before. You've got to be convincing, you've got to sing well, you've got to be in tune, the arrangement's got to be good. So that was my job when it came to his songs. And a lot of the time I succeeded. I think in a couple of occasions I didn't succeed that well, but, you know, that's...
Did you feel your on stage persona was different in the Mondo Rock days to the back comparing to the Daddy Cool days?
Absolutely, because some things are the same, but if the music's different, I'll be responding differently.
Yeah.
You know, there's a particular thing that Mondo Rock where I swing my arms from side to side. And it's a kind of, I don't do that with any Daddy Cool songs. It's like a groove that Mondo Rock had. It's like a move I do with them, you know, and not with anybody else.
What about your songwriting? Did you tackle that differently?
Or
Or have you always stuck to the same procedure?
Well, usually the procedure is pick up a guitar and start hitting it and see what comes out, you know, or a piano. I've still got the cassette somewhere of the night I wrote Cool World, and it's pretty much the whole song. It's not, the melody's not quite as evolved, but everything's there. You know, just strumming on a guitar. All the words are there.
You got
And
them
then
on.
you take it to a band, and the band brings things like, well, what kind of groove are we going to have? Well, we got gun, 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 gun. And you put in a few interesting things, gun, 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 gun. Like, where'd that come from? And then James Black will go, do-dee-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. That's the brilliance of having good people around you.
And of course,
make things interesting instead of just boring.
The upcoming year is going to be a big year for Mondo Rock. You've got the catalogue reissued, and that must be very exciting.
Well, I think the thing was, Mondo Rock has a sort of business partnership that existed for quite a while, because people are always licensing our songs for movies or TV or whatever, or putting them on compilation albums or whatever. But so we had to keep track of all that and have a business model set up for it. And but then, as far as like getting the whole catalogue out there, it was a bit patchy. So Liberation had made a couple of overtures towards us, and then they came to the point where they were starting a whole label called Bloodlines for people like us, who've been around for a while. And so we had got together them, and after a bit of talking, they said, well, we'll put out greatest hits. We're going to do this so-called anthology. We want to remaster everything, which they did, and now you can get all the albums. You can get them online, and you can get a couple on CD, but they're gradually going to come out. And the anthology, I think, is really, really good. And the remastering has been done very well too. So there are songs on the anthology, e.g. Some of the lesser-known songs like Marina, which is a fantastic Mccusker song, and hearing it, that and a few of the others on the anthology with your headphones on and going, holy, it's better than the vinyl. The thing is, it was always hard to master the vinyl really well, because it's a funny format. Some things sound great on vinyl, like blues does, for instance. But for modern recordings, to get all that bottom end and stuff, vinyl is not really the way to go. It's still, the digital remastering is definitely the way to go. And so the whole process of Liberation doing that has, like, I went back and listened to the Nuovo Mondo album after they'd remastered it. And, in my heart, I'd always been a bit disappointed. Something about that album never quite worked for me. But listening to it since it's been remastered, I'm going, that's a bloody good album. That's really good. Oh, that song, I'd forgotten all about that one. That's really good, So it's had a very positive effect on the band and on me, and I'm pretty happy that someone's looking up the catalogue. Took us a while to decide whether to do it or not, because if we've got our own things online, we had Cool World, and we had an album, and Trump Says the Boy was always being downloaded. We make 100%.
Yeah.
With them, you got to cut that down to, you got to sell about 3 or 4 times as many units through Liberation to make the same amount for the band. But the good part is, it's out there, the music's out there, people can get it, and it stimulates, the forward movement. So Mondo Rock, we don't want to go on tour and bore everybody for years and years, but we're doing 4 shows in the middle of June next year, and those tickets are on sale already. So if anyone wants to come and see us, they can see us in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. And meanwhile, we go about our own business. Everyone's still professional musicians, so we'll still know we've got our chops. And
yep.
I'm really I enjoy Mondo Rock from time to time. I just don't want to do it all the time.
All the time, yeah.
Rather, it's like when I go on do stuff at Mondo Rock, it's like having a holiday. For a start, I don't have to take a guitar. So I arrive at the airport and all I've got's a bag, and I'm going, this is great. I'm free. I'm going on a holiday. All I got to do is get up and sing. I don't have to play guitar or anything like that.
Yeah.
It has its little side benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I let you go, Ross, what else is in your plans for 2018? Any chance of a new recording of your own?
Yeah, I just took the first step last week, and I went into a studio in Melbourne and cut mainly one song that I'd written with blues musician April Aitken
Oh, yes.
a couple of years ago. And so he was in town, so I said, come on, we'll go in and get our song down. So we sort of got the basic track down, and it got me off my ass to do something. So I cut another song at the end of the session. So I've started, and I do have a bunch of songs. And one of the things I think I'm going to be doing is there's maybe about half a dozen songs which are kind of bluesy and a bit humorous too. So sort of a humorous blues EP,
Okay.
bluesy, soul-y kind of thing. And then I want to do a full-on album, but it's quite ambitious. It's going to take a lot of production, and I've got a lot of really good songs that I've been sitting on for a long time because they need attention and they need to be done well. So, but the blues thing I think will be a lot of fun. So that's what I've started work on.
Fantastic. We'll look forward to that.
When I say blues, my kind of idea of what the blues is different from everybody else's. So when it comes out, they'll probably say, that's not blues.
That's not blues.
Yeah. You know. So I've got a well-honed sense of I don't know, I guess it's popness or something. So things always have a, you know, they're tidy and they don't go on for too long.
Hey, Ross, thanks so much for your time. I know I've kept you longer than I said that I would, but it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for all the great music over the years, and I'm sure there's still plenty more to come.
Yeah, I hope so.
All the best. Take care.
Okay, see you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.